In just 94 seconds, a rude interruption would trigger the most devastating financial scandal in House Speaker history. Jasmine Crockett didn't appreciate being cut off mid-sentence during her remarks on ethics reform. She especially didn't appreciate Mike Johnson's condescending tone when he tried to correct her understanding of congressional procedures. What Johnson didn't know was that Crockett had spent weeks investigating his campaign finances, and his interruption had just given her the perfect opening to destroy his career with $2.4 million in questionable transactions. The look on the speaker's face when she started reading bank routing numbers said everything about the price of underestimating someone who'd done her homework. What did those financial records reveal that made the most powerful Republican in Congress look like he needed a good defense attorney? At exactly 4:23 p.m. on June 14, 2025, the House chamber buzzed with ethics reform debate tension. The ornate chamber, with its mahogany galleries and marble columns, provided the backdrop for what most expected to be another routine partisan battle over congressional accountability measures. Harsh television lights illuminated the 435 seats where representatives sat according to party lines, cameras capturing every moment of the legislative theater. Jasmine Crockett walked to the House podium like a prosecutor approaching her closing argument in the case of her career. Navy blazer pressed to perfection, thick folder of financial documents arranged by devastating relevance, microphone positioned for maximum clarity. Her expression was calm, controlled, absolutely lethal. She carried herself like someone who'd uncovered secrets that could reshape congressional leadership forever. Mike Johnson sat in the speaker's chair like a man carved from Louisiana Baptist authority and parliamentary power. American flag pin gleaming, gavel positioned for immediate control. He shuffled through procedural notes with the confidence of someone who'd never lost a floor confrontation. His practiced smile suggested he was ready for another day of managing Democratic criticism with rules, rhetoric, and righteous indignation. But today would expose the difference between procedural power and financial accountability. Three elements hung in the House chamber air like gathering storm clouds: the stalled ethics reform bill that Johnson had been blocking for months, Crockett's growing reputation for research-based political warfare, and the unusual presence of House Ethics Committee staff in the gallery. The debate began with standard partisan positioning on congressional accountability measures. Republican members defended existing ethics procedures adequate. Democratic members called for stronger disclosure requirements and independent oversight. Everything proceeded according to the usual script of reform versus resistance, until Crockett took the floor for her 5-minute remarks. "Mr. Speaker, members of the House," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. "Today we're debating whether Congress should strengthen its ethical standards and financial disclosure requirements." She opened her folder, revealing what appeared to be prepared remarks about campaign finance reform. Some argue that current disclosure rules are sufficient. Others believe we need more transparency to maintain public trust in our democratic institutions. Standard ethics reform rhetoric. Johnson looked bored, already preparing his parliamentary responses to predictable Democratic talking points. "The question before us today is simple," Crockett continued. "Should members of Congress be required to disclose all sources of income, including..." "Point of order." Johnson's voice boomed across the chamber as he banged his gavel. "The gentle lady is straying from the specific language of H.R. 8047. Please confine your remarks to the bill's actual provision." The interruption was parliamentary but petty, designed to throw Crockett off her rhythm and assert Johnson's control over the debate. Crockett paused, looking up at the speaker with an expression that combined surprise with something far more dangerous. "Mr. Speaker, I was actually about to address the bill's disclosure provisions quite specifically. If you'll allow me to continue." "The gentle lady will stay on topic," Johnson replied, his tone carrying the condescending edge of someone used to controlling conversations through procedural intimidation. "Thank you for that guidance, Mr. Speaker. Let me be very specific about disclosure requirements." She closed her prepared remarks and opened a different folder entirely. For example, should members be required to disclose consulting contracts with defense contractors, like the $847,000 in payments received by Johnson Strategic Consulting between 20. The chamber temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees instantly. Johnson's confident smile flickered like a malfunctioning gavel. That's completely inappropriate. Is it inappropriate to discuss disclosure requirements during a disclosure debate? Or is it inappropriate that you received $847,000 from Lockheed Martin subsidiaries while voting on defense appropriations? The devastating financial precision was surgical, relentless, and absolutely documented. She turned to another page. Should members disclose real estate investments, like the $680,000 in property purchases made through Louisiana Holdings LLC, a company you control, using campaign fund transfer? Johnson's parliamentary composure was cracking visibly. This is a personal attack disguised as, should members disclose speaking fees from special interests? Like the $340,000 you received from pharmaceutical lobbying groups while opposing Medicare drug pricing reform. The financial destruction was methodical, comprehensive, and absolutely public. Or perhaps we should discuss the most concerning disclosure gap of all, she continued, her voice taking on the rhythm of a prosecutorial summation. The $523,000 in wire transfers from Americans for Prosperity, the Koch network organization, to your personal legal defense fund. She held up a bank statement. These transfers occurred while you were blocking campaign finance reform legislation. Some might call that a conflict of interest. The House chamber had gone dead silent. Even Republican members stopped their usual supportive murmuring. Adding it all up, Crockett said, her voice clear and devastating. We're looking at $2.4 million in payments from defense contractors, pharmaceutical lobbyists, real estate schemes, and dark money organizations, all undisclosed in your financial statements. Johnson gripped his gavel like a lifeline. These are completely false allegations. Mr. Speaker, these aren't allegations. These are bank records, filed with the Louisiana Secretary of State, obtained through public records requests. She held up a thick stack of documents. Would you like me to read the account numbers? The routing information? The dates and amounts of each transfer? 94 seconds. That's how long it took from Johnson's interruption to his complete financial exposure. The chamber erupted in chaos. Republican members called for points of order that Johnson seemed unable to hear. Democratic members sat in stunned amazement at the completeness of the financial destruction. Reporters frantically typed, breaking news about the most explosive scandal in Speaker history. But Mike Johnson just sat frozen in the Speaker's chair, staring at Jasmine Crockett like he'd just witnessed his own political execution. Because he had. Within minutes, Team 24 Million Mike was trending on Twitter. The clip of Crockett systematically exposing Johnson's financial web went viral across all platforms faster than any congressional content in history. Financial transparency advocates shared detailed breakdowns of each payment source. CNN's Jake Tapper interrupted regular programming. Breaking news from Capitol Hill as House Speaker faces explosive allegations of undisclosed financial conflicts. MSNBC's Rachel Maddow tweeted, "This isn't just about disclosure violations. This is about the Speaker of the House being financially compromised by special interests." Even Fox News struggled to defend Johnson. Their business reporters confirmed that the financial records Crockett had cited were publicly available and apparently authentic. The afternoon brought a cascade of additional revelations that buried Johnson's speakership completely. The Washington Post obtained the complete Louisiana Holdings LLC filings, revealing a complex web of shell companies designed to obscure Johnson's financial relationships with defense contractors and pharmaceutical companies. The New York Times confirmed the Koch network payments, revealing that Johnson had received more dark money than any other current House member, while simultaneously blocking campaign finance reform legislation. Most damaging was the revelation that Johnson's legal defense fund had been funded by the same organizations whose interests he was supposed to regulate as Speaker. Ethics experts called it the most blatant conflict of interest in congressional leadership history. By evening, Mike Johnson's position as Speaker was untenable. 11 Republican members publicly called for his resignation. The House Ethics Committee announced an immediate investigation into his financial disclosures. The FBI confirmed they were reviewing potential violations of campaign finance and disclosure laws. Most significantly, the Republican caucus called an emergency meeting for the following morning to discuss new leadership elections. Johnson's own party was abandoning him faster than lobbyists fleeing a corruption investigation. Johnson's response came at 8 p.m. through a written statement that made everything worse. Instead of addressing the financial evidence or explaining the undisclosed payments, he attacked Crockett personally and claimed the records were taken out of context. The statement was immediately criticized by ethics experts as tone-deaf and legally inadequate. Several Republican senators called for Johnson to provide detailed explanations rather than personal attacks. Meanwhile, Crockett appeared on Anderson Cooper 360, looking exactly as composed as she had during the floor speech. "Anderson, this isn't about partisan politics," she said, her voice steady and measured. "It's about basic transparency. The Speaker of the House cannot be financially beholden to the same special interests he's supposed to regulate. How did you obtain these financial records? Through legitimate public records requests and standard opposition research. Everything I presented today is publicly available information that should have been disclosed in Speaker Johnson's financial statements." Cooper leaned forward. "What's your response to claims this was an ambush?" Crockett's slight smile carried the weight of meticulous preparation. "An ambush? I was giving a speech about disclosure requirements when the speaker interrupted me. He created the opening for this discussion. When he tried to silence me, I simply responded with facts." The interview clip garnered 28 million views within 24 hours. 4 days later, the final blow came from Johnson's own caucus. Facing a revolt from Republican members embarrassed by the financial scandal, Johnson announced he would step down as Speaker to focus on addressing these baseless allegations and clearing my name. The resignation was remarkably brief, mentioning nothing about the $2.4 million in undisclosed payments or the ongoing ethics investigations. 6 weeks later, federal prosecutors in Louisiana announced a criminal investigation into Johnson's financial activities and potential violations of congressional disclosure requirements. The case was built largely on the records Crockett had presented during that June floor speech. The investigation revealed a pattern of financial manipulation that extended far beyond undisclosed payments. Internal communications showed Johnson had specifically structured his consulting arrangements to avoid disclosure requirements while maintaining maximum influence over relevant legislation. 8 months later, Mike Johnson was indicted on charges of conspiracy to defraud the United States, violation of congressional disclosure laws, and accepting illegal gratuities. The indictment detailed how he'd used his leadership position to benefit his private financial interests while hiding those relationships from Congress and the public. During his eventual sentencing hearing, the federal judge made a point that resonated throughout the political establishment. "Mr. Johnson, you held the second highest constitutional office in America. Your betrayal of that trust through undisclosed financial relationships strikes at the foundation of representative democracy." Jasmine Crockett, meanwhile, became a national symbol of congressional accountability. Her methodical exposure of Johnson's financial web was studied in law schools and ethics programs as a masterclass in transparency advocacy. The moment also established new standards for congressional leadership. The Johnson standard required complete financial disclosure and divestiture from potential conflicts before assuming leadership positions. But perhaps the most significant impact was on the ethics reform bill itself. Johnson's scandal provided the political momentum needed to pass comprehensive disclosure requirements, making it nearly impossible for future members to hide financial relationships with special interests. During a quiet interview with The Atlantic 6 months later, Crockett reflected on the interruption that changed congressional accountability forever. "People ask if I planned to destroy Mike Johnson's speakership that day," she said, sitting in her Capitol Hill office. "The truth is, I planned to give a speech about ethics reform." Speaker Johnson destroyed his own career when he interrupted me while being financially compromised by the same interests I was discussing. She paused, looking at the financial documents that had sparked everything. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do in politics is simply follow the money. Mike Johnson's problem wasn't that I attacked him. His problem was that he couldn't explain where $2.4 million came from and why he'd hidden it from the American people. The lasting impact of those 94 seconds continued to reshape congressional ethics. New disclosure requirements made it nearly impossible to hide financial relationships. Enhanced enforcement mechanisms ensured violations would be quickly discovered and prosecuted. Most importantly, it demonstrated that even the most powerful political leaders weren't immune to accountability when someone was willing to do the research and ask hard questions. The financial transparency revolution sparked by Johnson's downfall led to the exposure of similar schemes by other members, resulting in the most comprehensive ethics cleanup in congressional history. Congressional leadership doesn't always announce itself with gavels and parliamentary procedure. Sometimes it walks to a microphone with bank records and reminds everyone that democracy requires transparency. What happens when procedural power meets financial accountability? What happens when someone tries to silence the very person investigating their corruption? What happens when an interruption triggers the most devastating disclosure in congressional history? The answer was written in 94 seconds that changed the speakership and reminded America that some secrets can't stay hidden forever. If this story inspired you, don't just scroll, like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Here, truth doesn't knock. It enters with bank records and leaves with indictments. What's the most shocking financial disclosure you've discovered about your representatives? Drop it below.